Hi guys, today is June the 4th and it is day 76 of our little lockdown. 76 days we've been at this, so I think we probably will make 100 by the look of things. So because although there are sort of talks of certain things opening, my workspace has not been anywhere on the radar of things that they're talking about opening. Yours might be.
Well, my workspace technically has been open this whole time for emergencies. They are talking about, well, last I heard from them, they were talking about seeing when they could reopen to sort of sell glasses and things. But even then, for now, I'm in furlough and I don't know when they're going to ask
there
me
is
back.
talk of non-essential shops opening I can't remember when it is in Wales now. Possibly, well, they haven't actually set a date, I think, but last time they did the 3 weeks thing, they said prepare to be opening so that if next time we do an announcement, you'll be ready. So potentially sort of about 2 weeks from now. But even if they do open that, it's still going to mean probably much reduced footfall on the high street, which will probably still mean that your business won't need full staffing, and with you having to travel.
Some shops have had to call people in for sort of shop fitting and organising stock checks and things. I don't know, but yeah, and certainly even if they open non-essential shops, I think from our point of view, we're probably gonna do what we can to kind of stick in the house and wait things out a bit rather than kind of rush back to any. Not that we have loads of money for shopping sprees anyway, but we're gonna probably stick with Amazon.com and online other online retailers.
I would rather not be using Amazon, but unfortunately it just does seem to be the place that you can get everything.
Retailers who pay their taxes are available, but I shouldn't have led with them. But point being that we won't be kind of rushing back out to the shops.
No. As with everything, when they sort of do relax any measures, I'm of the thought that I don't really want to be in the first wave of people going to anything once it's reopened. So, like, the first day they open restaurants, I'm not going to be going to a restaurant. Obviously, like, there's things that I can't wait to do again. But even when they open them, I'm not going to be there on the first night doing it, because a lot of this is releasing restrictions and seeing what happens. So I kind of want to wait till we've seen what happens before I do the things. So obviously things that I have to do, like if I'm told I sort of have to reopen, or I'm sort of forced to reopen because I won't have any money to keep going otherwise, then that'll force my hand and I'll do what I have to. But when it comes to sort of things that just doing what I want to, I'm going to wait.
We don't really want to be the canaries in any given mineshaft, do we?
Not at all. And like I do totally respect that some people just are absolutely clamouring to do certain things, and I can understand that. So I'm just moving that. I just realised I was being poked in the side by a printer. I can understand that, and I won't judge anyone if they do. Sort of like on the first day of shops opening, you go shopping. There might be some stuff that you really need, and that's fair enough. I just won't personally be doing that myself. I mentioned yesterday, but I had to do a few things quite fleeting yesterday. Schools have been announced that they are reopening in Wales on the 29th. What they have said with that, though, interestingly, is parents who choose not to send their children back will not be fined. There will not be any sort of sense of truancy or anything like that. It is entirely down to personal choice of the parents. And actually, I think they would struggle if 100% of the pupils did all say, right, we're all coming back, because it's going to be a logistical nightmare, because schools don't have huge swathes of spare space. They don't have spare classrooms, and if you halve the number of pupils that you can have in a classroom, at least, because actually classes are usually higher than 30, really, realistically, other than in sort of small rural schools, you're looking at sort of 30 to 35 as standard, and they're saying that there can't be more than 15 in a standard classroom. I guess school halls can be turned into classrooms and things, but you're not going to have enough room on a normal school site for 100% of the pupils to go in. So even with it being down to a third, because I think what they're going to do, by the sounds of yesterday's announcement, is have staggered times. So it'll be the break times will be at different times for different year groups, and sort of the start and finish times will be at different times. There might be half days and things going on, so that you're not going to have a whole school present. Which, like, I guess all of that makes sense if you have to do it, but I'm just very dubious as to whether or not we're at the stage where we have to do it. I think personally, were I to be on the committees having my sort of 2 cents in this, I would say maybe there is a call maybe to have the year 6 pupils who are transitioning to high school and to maybe have the GCSE and A-level students back in. I wouldn't be too worried about having A-level students back in, actually. I think they're of an age that they can social distance and they're about to do A-levels. I think that would be worthwhile and could be socially distanced and would be helpful. But the idea of sort of getting in most of your primary school kids back in, I don't really think it's being driven by how good the education is going to be. I think it is more so that it can stimulate the economy into more people having the freedom to go back to work. I do know some people, though, who have kids and are absolutely desperate for schools to reopen and are just like, I can't wait. And to be fair, there's a particular person I'm thinking of. She's a key worker anyway, so she's already in the risk melting pot. So I don't think she's particularly nervous for her child to be going back to the melting pot because she works in a hospital. She's like, I'm already the melting pot. But all of the kids that he's going to be in school with, like, there just seems to be too much knock-on effects. So I get it, and I won't judge anyone if they decide to send their kids back or if they decide not to send their kids back. I think that's fine, and that's down to like parents' choice. I think the task at hand for teachers and schools in general, just to sort out the logistics of this, will be nightmarish. And I just don't know if it's worth it for those extra 4 weeks of term time that you'd get, rather than just going, well, let's forget those 4 weeks and have the summer holidays where we would normally have had them, and that will give us a huge chunk of time to play with. Maybe they could have put more time and effort into perhaps opening more childcare hubs for people who could voluntarily send their kids there, but rather than it even being based on schooling, it being more based on childcare. And actually, if that's what you're doing it for, call a spade a spade. Like, have some sort of scheme of voluntary, because at the moment the childcare hubs are for vulnerable children and children of key workers. Maybe we could extend those schemes to allow voluntary attendance for children of parents who, for whatever reason, need to get back to work, want to get back to work, or whatever. Because I think people are really struggling to homeschool, which I have to say does sound nightmarish. I can't imagine that I would be doing any better than anyone else at this. And I think, teachers, at least teachers are trained to teach and so can do that. Whereas if you've got, say, 3 kids, they're all in different age groups, they've all got to be taught different stuff for homeschooling, and none of them are interested in doing any of it, I can imagine that's fairly hellish.
By distractions as well at home. They've got their toys and video games and things. I mean, I get distracted sometimes. I'll be watching a TV show and I'll be distracted looking at a book on a shelf that I quite fancy reading in the middle of some other entertainment. So, let alone when I'm trying to get some work done.
Yeah. Oh God, I'm a terrible procrastinator, and So I think it's so complicated and so difficult, and there aren't any straightforward answers. I'm not saying, oh well, it's obvious this is what they should do. I just personally think the risk of reopening schools outweighs the reward for those 4 weeks of additional schooling. I suspect the educational value of those 4 weeks is gonna feel like the end of term normally. There's going to be not many of them there. They're all going to be catching up with each other, and I think it's going to not really be the best. I think, for older kids, maybe more so, but for primary school age kids, I think realistically, particularly, there's going to be not all of us are here, and some of us can go and some of us can't go. Like for any kids who aren't particularly into school, they're going to be feeling really like they've had a raw deal, because they're like, well, I've got to come back in, but some of the other nerds are staying at home. What the hell? But yeah, it just seems like a bit. I'm nervous about it. I'm worried that it just, having seen with one evening of spending some time with an under 6, they can't social distance. Any semblance of social distancing will be fleeting. And essentially, if you're not going to do it for the whole time, you might as well not do it at all.
I mean, we'll get to it, but we're expecting children who haven't seen their friends in weeks and weeks and weeks.
Well, months.
Literal months now. to social distance and say 2 metres apart, and yet the nation's MPs
they can't
do
it
it for like 2 hours.
Yeah,
It's
I don't know
insane.
if you'll have seen this story. Chris actually read more details on it than I. I did sort of see fleetingly. There's complaints. Right, I wanted to talk about this yesterday actually. MPs have been in session this whole time, understandably, because obviously we need Parliament to still be in session. But so that people don't have to do any unnecessary travel, and also for social distancing purposes, they created a system very quickly, which apparently works perfectly well, where they were all able to sort of essentially via Zoom or a similar app all be present, speak to the House as needed, but also the most important thing is they could vote. They could vote remotely. And that was working and actually seemed to be going quite well. Bearing in mind, quite a lot of those MPs don't live in London. They may have a house in London so that they can do their second home thing so that they can travel, but most constituencies are everywhere else in the UK, going right up to the top of Scotland, all the way up North Wales, like travelling to London several days a week so that you can vote on things is sort of it doesn't seem very eco-friendly or sensible at the best of times, but also it's during these times, unnecessary travel should be absolutely discouraged at all costs. Putting people in a room with other people that they don't need to be there with should be discouraged at all costs. They have been sitting in Parliament. Parliament hasn't been sat empty, but it's been very few MPs there. So we've still had like Prime Minister's questions and stuff in the chamber and all of that sort of malarkey, and it's sort of been semi-virtual, semi-real life. And that seems to have been working quite well. It was being criticised, I think mainly by Tory MPs. Basically, they wanted to go back to it being in person. I think Jacob Rees-Mogg was one of the forerunners of that sort of campaign. His argument was that it sets an example that if everybody else were encouraging everybody else to go back to it, we should go back to work. I don't think that's really what it was about. I actually think he'd prefer to discourage people from voting.
I think the people who are being encouraged to go back to work are people who, work in shops who couldn't work from home. But actually working from home, is kind of better for the environment. It's outside of this, irrespective.
I think that
when
sets
we're
a
supposed
better
to be
example.
Sort of staying alert and everything, stay home when you can is part of it, isn't it?
And they can.
And they can. And he will cite tradition, Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we know he's a fan of tradition. Many of the traditions from the Victorian era live on in his household. But, I think the real reason behind a lot of this is that basically Keir Starmer was doing a really good job at Prime Minister's Questions time, and Boris needs back his kind of rogues gallery of jeering bully boys to kind of sit behind him going, "Ugh."
Well, the thing, and that is, I think, really what it boils down to. I think they need to have more people behind Boris to back him up, because he is flailing, he is out of his depth, and when he can't sort of hide what he's saying with bluster and bullshit, the content is just not there. It's just quite often fairly meaningless statements that just sort of string little helpful phrases together.
And it sounds better if there's people jeering and booing. It's like wrestling.
Yeah.
Like live wrestling. But, you need the atmosphere, you need the people behind it for it to kind of work. But the thing is, it's not a theatrical performance, it's political debate. It should be,
and it should all boil down to what is the best and most sensible decision that is going to benefit the most people.
And Boris Johnson is doing such a bad job that if his the information that he's trying to put out there, the things he's trying to say, don't stand up on their own merit without people booing or jeering,
then they don't.
That suggests to me that the traditional system of people sat around in the Houses of Parliament jeering and booing each other
isn't helpful to political progress.
No, and it also when you stop to think about it, it seems mad, doesn't it? And weirdly antiquated.
Oh, it's so antiquated. I've thought this for a long time. The voting system is insane.
But if you're in a boardroom in a company,
yeah,
and you're chairing a meeting and you're talking to the other members of the board and trying to get your point across, it would be spectacularly unprofessional for the board to sort of sit
Uh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It would
around.
be ridiculous. You don't expect adults to behave this way. But the voting system is the main thing that I am really against Parliament being back in physical session for, is because, and this is what we got started talking about this, is what you basically have to do is after a topic has been discussed, you then go out to vote. So you all have to go in single file into a chamber and post your vote, a physical vote, and then they're counted up. The trouble with that is there's there could be at any given point hundreds of MPs, but they're only allowed currently 50 in the chamber anyway. So the queues, pacing people apart by 2 meters, go on for ages, and it's taking over an hour to take a vote on a single issue, which is just not efficient when they could have all been at home and they could vote online and the votes would be counted immediately, because also the archaic system of you all vote and then somebody counts it, I'm sure they've got very good at counting quite quickly, but still bullshit, isn't it? So yeah, let's drag Parliament into the modern era, because it makes more sense, it's more efficient, it's safer, and it sets a better example. So all of this seems insane. But yeah, so the staff, so you read this story, so maybe you should
because basically,
explain
as
what...
you're saying, there was people were queuing for over an hour to vote, and even with that happening, they weren't managing to maintain social distance.
No.
So, our elected representatives during this time, our MPs, can't maintain 2 meters distance between themselves. They don't have the patience or the temperament for it, presumably, to just kind of keep their distance and sensibly do things. And yeah, it's frustrating because it slows things down, it delays things, but we're all experiencing that when we go to the shops.
Yeah, it's good for them to experience a bit of it.
And because they were unable, for this parliamentary vote to maintain the distance and everything, workers in Parliament, people like the security guards and other people, just admin people who just work in the building there.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of sort of civil servant staff there,
Exactly.
and also there's canteens, there's coffee shops, there's that.
Stuff. There's
Well, I don't think they have to pay, but like
people who aren't elected officials anyway, who work in Parliament, they have a union, and that union is actually threatening to put those workers on strike because they feel they're not being put in a safe environment because the MPs can't social distance.
I have to say, I hope that they do, and then that forces the hand into going back to virtual, because that does make more sense, as far as I can see.
They strike, and then the MPs go back to virtual, although the flip side of that, I guess, is it means going forward there might be less need for canteen workers in the Houses of Parliament if there weren't so many people there. So but anyway,
everybody will still have their offices there, and they'll still hold meetings there. And
it's just kind of... It's stupid that they're not doing it virtually anyway, but the fact that they are doing this and yet they can't, even for like one afternoon or whatever, maintain social distance, stick to their own rules.
Well, they're not very good at that, are
they? And yet, children as young as sort of 4 or 5 are going to be expected to kind of maintain social distance in schools.
It's an utter nonsense.
It's
absolutely nonsensical.
It's a fairy tale, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Well, I think that's the word I used the other day in the blurb. It's an absolute fairy tale. But it is. I should sort of mention, actually, just sort of real world stuff, our life stuff. You may notice it looks like we're filming this at a godly hour. We are. Yes. It's daylight.
Yeah, so if anything happens this evening in the world...
I'm not going to have a clue. We're filming this at, I think it's about 5:30, 5:45 now. The reason for that is because now that we're allowed, my niece is coming over to visit us in the garden. Well, actually, just me, because our garden's a lot smaller than my parents' garden. So Chris is going to go take the dog out for a walk, and I'm going to be in the garden with my niece for a bit, which will be lovely. Again, it's so nice that just that one little easing of restrictions has meant that, like, my mum could send me a text this morning and just sort of like, Ariadne would like to come over this afternoon, is that okay? And I'm like, yes it is!
It does make a difference, and I think, it makes a lot of difference to a lot of people.
Really, I can't really quite put it into words, but there's a sense of relief, and there's a real sense of joy. There's like, yay, I can see family.
Well, it's
I'm not sort of being hyperbolic with that. I mean it. It's genuinely a little. I felt a little bit blissed out and euphoric when I came home and it was just takeaway in the garden. But those are the real things that matter, is being able to spend time with people you care about, and just be normal like that. We weren't talking about the real world. Well, it did creep in, obviously, but just to be able to just be around your loved ones without everything having this backdrop
well, that would be nice.
Of doom and gloom.
I mean, speaking of nieces, it was my niece's birthday, her 3rd birthday yesterday.
Oh yeah, she was spoiled, rotten. It was brilliant.
So many toys and games and things. So, and my sister, who made loads of effort, by the way, to kind of give her a lovely birthday, even in lockdown. They did a little fairy hunt in the garden. They made her like a little fairy birthday lunch and pin the unicorn's horn on the unicorn.
Is it the horn on the unicorn?
Yeah, and she, you know, done
lots
of
really went all out,
trying to make these things creative, and she had a lot of big stack of presents and things. And my sister Heather also decided it would be nice for Erica's birthday for us all, the immediate family, my sister, my parents, to all have a big video chat and wish Erica a happy birthday and have a bit of a catch up. I mean, Erica, being 3 and surrounded by new toys,
wasn't that interested in the family.
She
said hello and goodbye and showed us some toys, but mainly she had lots of stuff to play with, which was fine. It was nice to see.
But I think it would have been nice, obviously, if we'd been able to be there and she could have shown us the toys in person.
Yeah, and
I
we
think
could have played with them with her, and then that would have been lovely.
And we'd had some quality time with her. But even beyond sort of Erica, it was nice to see, obviously, the rest of my family. But it is a different experience doing that on a Zoom chat to seeing them in person, actually being in the space with them. You know, I can't give my parents a hug, and you can't, like, when you meet up with someone, you know, a lot of the time you kind of meet up and you have a meal or you have an activity or you do something, and there's like, it was nice talking to them and catching up, but you're all on your Zoom screens and you're just sort of staring at each other.
It changes the way you interact, because you can't have, like, when you're with somebody and you're eating or having a drink or watching a film or whatever, there are comfortable silences that you spend together, whereas when you're in a Zoom chat there is this sort of like, who's talking now, and there's this sort of sense of everybody must be talking, because you can't just sort of sit and be.
No, that's it. If I go back and visit my parents, you know, obviously we'll have a catch up when I get home and how are you and this, that and the other, but then maybe we'll just be sat in the lounge in the evening and just maybe I'll be reading a book, maybe there's something on the telly, maybe mum's doing a cross stitch, whatever it might be, but it's just nice to be in the same space, to share that space, to be around each other. And that's on a Zoom chat. Like I say, it's nice to see them, but we are missing out on that kind of thing, and we can't play it really, you know, play a board game, or there's lots of things you can't do, and it almost feels to me like reminiscent of like a prison visit. Like it's nice that you get to see the person, but you can't give them a hug, and you can't just hang out. You've just and you kind of, there's the kind of pressure to just keep the conversation going in a way.
Yeah, that is a good analogy. Actually, I hadn't thought of it that way.
I say that as someone who's never been to prison or on a prison visit, but as someone who has watched a lot of Orange Is the New Black, so I think I should know.
Yeah, expert.
Yeah. But yeah, so happy birthday, Erica.
That was
sorry we didn't
lovely.
bring it up on yesterday's vlog, but it was quite a serious Black Lives Matter vlog, and
yesterday was
really
a bit heavy.
Tonally,
and to be honest, like the last few days, well, all through this, we've had peaks and troughs of it, peaks and troughs of it being sort of very heavy for a while, and then you sort of get into like a bit of a swing of it, and the news isn't going too mental for a few days. It's just ticking over, and then something else will happen. These last few days have been a bit heavy, and so it's quite hard to sort of be jokey, and you don't want to sort of go like, forget about that, I just want to talk about something nice. But
you don't want to make too many sort of silly jokes that kind of undermine the seriousness of what you're talking about.
No, and I am struggling a little bit, thankfully sort of feeling like relatively robust on how I'm handling all of the real world stuff, but just the sheer scale of, because I don't say this lightly, America looks like it's heading for civil war. It's really scary times. Thankfully, I saw something today which gave me again a glimmer of hope. So what I say by that is, obviously the protests have kicked off. They've now gone across. Well, they've gone global, but they're in all 50 American states have seen protests. Many of which have turned to rioting. starting with the catalyst of the death of George Floyd, but there are so many cases that are similar that it has become a unifying, essentially, it's repeating what we saw in the civil rights movement of 68, of the rioting and marching that sort of led to that. We're in a sort of, it feels like a new era of, right, okay, this is still, we need change. This is absolutely unacceptable and we need to make our voices heard. Absolutely right. So it's essentially entirely across all of the states in the US. In response to this, Donald Trump basically threatened the people with military action from his own military forces, saying, if local governors can't get things under control using the National Guard, then I will send in the troops. There were sort of, he was putting in provisos of, I don't want to, this isn't against peaceful protest and people should have the right to peaceful protest, which I don't think he meant. But essentially, he declared war on people protesting, and that doesn't seem very constitutional to me. I think the right to free speech and the right to peaceful assembly, I'm pretty sure they're in the Constitution, as are the fact that all men are created equal is also in the Constitution, and I believe in one of Lincoln's most famous speeches. And the fact that you are essentially threatening military action on your own people really smacks of dictatorship to me, and it's very scary. I listened to this speech in mounting horror. What I didn't know when watching this speech was this was just after. So just before he did this speech, he did a photo op outside. There's a church that's basically opposite the White House that's got long-standing links with the White House, and sort of regular press things have happened there. I think where they've done memorial services and minute silence and at the Lincoln Memorial and things like that. This is the church that's been used. So there's long-standing sort of patterns of this church being used by the White House. He didn't actually tell them he was coming there. He just marched his way over there. But there were peaceful protesters on the White House lawn, and he used tear gas and rubber bullets on the peaceful protesters in order that he could get to the church for a photo op. In the church, because the reverend who's in charge of that particular church, I'm not sure quite, because I don't think her title was reverend, but I'm not sure what her title was, so I'll have to double check that. She basically was appalled and deeply offended because it was purely a photo op. He stood there, he misquoted the Bible to justify military action, did not pray, was not respectful, did not, nobody else has ever, no president in the history has ever been quite so flagrantly doing this for the cameras. And it was so disrespectful. And the fact that peaceful protesters were tear gassed in order, and also this was before there was a 7 p.m. statewide, I think it was statewide, it might be across the whole country, but there was a 7 p.m. curfew. At 6:20 he tear gassed the protesters, so they had every right to be there until 7 p.m. And even at 7 p.m. you'd say you should have fair warning before you resort to methods such as tear gassing.
And if you are going to tear gas them, it should be maybe for public safety or something, not so the president can get in and take a photo. Yeah,
that should never be used basically as a means to sort of kettle people out of an area. It should only be in the means of public safety. But some of the oh my god, some of the footage that is coming out of America right now is absolutely fucking appalling. The National Guard, for example, there is footage that's gone viral. There's a statewide curfew in many states. It might actually be, as I say, countrywide. But in the rules for that, you are allowed to be outside on your own property after 7 p.m. But there's footage of the National Guard coming down a sort of suburban street, screaming at people to get into their houses and firing, I have to hope, rubber bullets. But rubber bullets can kill. A rubber bullet to the eye will kill you. They're not little. They're not like air gun bullets. They are like big ass. They're like plastic, really. They're harder than like a car tire.
A blunt object hitting you
at some speed.
Yes, and sometimes at quite close range.
People have been killed. People have been blinded in these riots. This isn't a nice, gentle deterrent, and tear gas is deeply unpleasant. There's footage of toddlers being tear gassed, but yeah, these National Guard people are literally saying, get inside, and then when people don't get inside, even though they are literally just standing on their front porch, they start to open fire on civilians in their own homes. That is terrifying, and that is the act of a dictator, as far as I can see it.
A lot of things like Animal Hospital or Jim Will Fix It have been ruined
by
the behaviours of celebrity paedophiles. Like, we can't really just enjoy Animal Hospital anymore.
I don't think that's still getting reruns.
Well, I mean, the behaviours of this US president have ruined old episodes of The US Apprentice. And I'm not even an American.
Were you watching it?
I'm not even an American citizen. I mean, I've not watched it it's not been on in years. I think he stopped doing it when he got the top job.
Yeah, I would have thought so.
But you can't, even if they did a repeat of that now, I wouldn't be inclined to tune in.
No, it's like making light of it, but also he's declared it an act of terrorism. So if you are a member of Antifa, which by the way isn't actually like an organised, you don't get like a membership card. It's a movement. It's a way of thinking, and Antifa just stands for anti-fascist. He's declared that if you are associated or affiliated with Antifa, that can be declared an act of terrorism.
Which means essentially, to not be a terrorist in the USA, you have to be at least neutral to fascism.
Yeah, well, the thing is, nobody who is fascist says that they are fascist, but I bet that they'd make anti-fascism terrorist. That's clearly saying, yeah, I'm a fucking fascist. That's what's coming out of America right now.
What was the letter you told me about?
Oh, the letter. Yes, sorry. This gave me a bit of hope, and actually this might be a good point to end. There was a letter that was sort of sent to the White House by all of the chief. The chief officers, the chief of staff of basically every branch of the military and the Space Force, which sounds like a cartoon.
Force.
But yeah, so sort of the Navy, the Army, the Home Guard, the Coast Guard, literally the whole lot of them. Everybody sort of top officers, if not the absolute top people from the top of all of those organisations, all wrote this letter, basically saying very cleverly, without actually any inflammatory tones, but just said, we wish to make it clear that we swore an oath to protect the American people and American ideals, and will at all costs defend that oath and follow that oath, which essentially, reading between the lines, is we are not going to take action on American civilians.
Which seems good. Insane, doesn't it? It feels like that's the sort of thing that should happen in a country where there's a dictator and where there might need to be a coup. And
there is a dictator.
Know,
he's a dictator.
It's insane, isn't it, that is the situation we find ourselves in.
Thank God. The military seem to be going, hang on a minute, fella. No, we're not doing that.
I love that the Space Force are involved.
I don't know how many, do they have ground officers?
I sort of, because it throws up the idea that maybe they could have had a similar letter where everyone but the Space Force signed it, and then the president attacked his own people from space, and that is a B movie that I would watch.
Yeah, I would watch that. It's a B movie that might happen a few years from now. I wouldn't have put it past them. Maybe the guys who do South Park.
Good.
But yeah, it's absolutely insane, and I don't say it lightly. Nothing that he is doing is de-escalating the situation, and when your entire country is in essentially open rebellion, maybe you're to blame. And I think maybe threatening the people for protesting with military action probably is just fanning the flames.
Well, this many people protesting in a democracy suggests that maybe you need to listen to them. I don't
think old Donald Trump listens to people because he's a fascist dictator, and he's probably throwing his toys out of the pram. What I would hope to see is even the dickheads on his side going, hang on a minute, fella, we need to rein you in a bit here. because it's like it can't be tolerated. Even by the moderate right should be horrified by this. The Republican Party should be horrified by this. Your president is threatening your people. Like that, how is that any level of patriotic? And the whole flag waving, we're amazing, we're the best country in the world. Not if you start shooting your own people, you're not. Well, you aren't anyway. Like, it's just clearly you're not. Like, I don't know where. I think New Zealand's probably top of my list at the moment. But yeah, like, it's terrifying. And I can make jokes about it only because I'm horrified and I'm trying to make sense of it. It's fucking insanity. We should stop there. It's 35 minutes. But yeah, so I'm sure there'll be more to report tomorrow.
More.
Probably more that happens this evening. Fucking hell.
Let's do a more light-hearted one, you said.
I know, I did. Well, I just said if we can throw in a bit of levity here and there, please let's try, because I know these have been heavy. Maybe we'll get drunk and have a silly one in a few days, because I think we'll need it.
Well, your birthday's coming up, isn't it?
Yeah.
So.
Oh, but that's 2 weeks from now. In like 2020 time, that might as well be next year. Like, a lot could happen between here and the 15th. But yeah, that one should be a fun one, I think. Yeah, I think we'll do it. We'll vlog early so that I can just enjoy my birthday. Sorry, guys.
No, that's
maybe open some presents on the blog. And just have a nice one, depending on what's happening in the real world. Maybe I just won't look at any news the day before or on my birthday in case the world is ending.
Yeah, maybe we have a little bit of just selfish time for Ellie.
Yeah, I might need it. But to be honest, I think we might need to let off a bit of steam before then, because Christ alive.
Dear.
So,
right.
like and subscribe, guys.
There's no shame in it.
There's no shame in it.